How do we start?
Yes.
So we start? Yes? Yes. Well, thank you very much, dear students, dear professors. I'm sorry for this short delay, but here from UNESCO's headquarters, I would like to greet you, to thank you, I would say, how excited I am about this wonderful initiative to link with the 38 universities, if I'm right, across all continents, and to talk about sustainable development and what makes sustainable development happen in this world. I think the fact that we're doing this through new technologies also shows the power of connectivity, of new technologies, how we disseminate knowledge, how we share ideas, how we discuss also these ideas. And as long as one of the core mandates of UNESCO is also to create inclusive knowledge-based societies and to work also to foster a global citizenship, which is, and I will speak about that a little further on. I see this global masters in development practice also as an innovative step in these directions. And allow me to thank my very good friend, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, the director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, to thank also Professor Shiv Somashwar for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you and to join this global classroom today. I would like also to thank all our students. I have here in front of me also some of the questions that they have contributed well in advance, and I will try to answer these questions throughout the presentation, because I do believe that some of the ideas are born exactly through such exchanges. Allow me also to praise the Sustainable Development Solutions Network that was launched 2 years ago. I was at the launch also at Columbia University, because I think this exemplifies the way we tackle contemporary problems, how we exchange perspectives globally across different cultures, continents, and different perspectives. I would like to say also what I consider important in the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and also in this Global Masters in Development Practice. I think that we are talking here about development practice. We are talking about solutions. We are talking about concrete policies and concrete projects, things that work, things that can change, can be transformative. I think it is extremely important that we are not talking only about theory. And I believe it is important at this particular moment when the United Nations and the international community globally are engaged in a very deep debate, important debate, profound debate about development and sustainable development, sustainability of development. And I think what we consider from UNESCO's point of view also very important is the necessity of a, as we call it, a paradigm shift. And I think we share with Professor Sachs, also with the Earth Institute, with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a lot of common ideas, common approaches to this paradigm shift. It is important from our perspective because we have to change the way we think and the way we consider growth, wealth, future of our societies. We have to make a shift in the way we consume, we produce. We have to make a shift in our lifestyles. And I would say even a shift of how we practice development, which is part of this paradigm shift that we want to achieve. And for us, for UNESCO, an organization that has been constituted, established 70 years ago, and we are celebrating next year our birthday, our anniversary. I think fundamentally what we're talking about peace. We are talking about human dignity. We are talking about human development. And in our constitution, we have a very important provision. And this provision affirms, and I quote, that political and economic arrangements alone cannot secure lasting peace. And this is something that we very often remind ourselves of. In our constitution, further on, it is written that peace requires intellectual and moral solidarity of humanity. When we speak about moral and intellectual solidarity, when we speak about peace, when we speak about sustainable development, for us, there are two aspects very important. On one side, it is how we interact with one another as humanity, as representatives of different communities, cultures coming with different histories, with different backgrounds. And on the other side, of course, not least important nowadays, when we consider that we have come to the limits, our planet and us have come to the limits of our resources, it's also the way we are on this planet, of being on this planet, of how we interact also with the environment. And on one side, we say, and it is true, that our world has never been so interconnected, that we have an opportunities for unlimited access to knowledge, a vast opportunities to communicate, to exchange. And I believe what we're doing now, this World Open Class, is a good case in point. But at the same time, we have to admit that there are also deep problems. There are challenges that we have to tackle today, not postpone them for tomorrow. And these opportunities that exist at the same time have as a background also deepening inequalities. There are social and cultural tensions that are there. And also some of our activities have, unfortunately, a deep impact on the environment and on the climate change paradigm and importance. So in order to give the right answers, in order to find the right solutions, I think what is extremely important is first and foremost to set the problems right, to have a close cooperation, to create platforms and partnerships for such cooperation, and then also to innovate, to find the right new also approaches towards solving some of these problems. I think it is kind of a test for our humanity and for all of us today to see whether we can create these platforms of innovation and of finding the right solutions. Of course, when we speak about knowledge-based societies, when we speak about shifting the paradigm of development, of changing the mentality, changing the way we live, we relate also to the environment. One of the, I would say, most important and profound and sustainable instruments of leverage of doing this is, of course, education, is learning, is what also, that is why I guess Professor Sachs asked me to speak about this topic particularly today. In fact, just some 2 weeks ago, we were together with him in New York during the first week of the General Assembly session, a very busy week and full, I would say, with the important global events. And we together were advocating in different high-level occasions on greater responsibility, of greater solidarity, of deepening partnerships, of taking some bold decisions, putting pressure on politicians to take commitments and important decisions. And I believe that what is happening in the all the area of climate change, because there was the very important climate summit in New York, which was launched by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. We saw all these political leaders who were expressing both, I would say, anxiety, but also a lot of ambition. And I think the main theme that emerged during this first opening week of the United Nations General Assembly, and what I took with me back, I hope also Professor Sachs had the same impression, was a universal call for fighting extreme poverty, of putting extreme poverty into the center of the possible future Sustainable Development Agenda, to look at the questions of climate change and to well prepare for the next two climate summits, climate conferences. The first one this December in Lima, in Peru, which we hope will have a very solid impact also and discussion, important commitments, so that then we go all to Paris, or I speak from Paris, to come here to Paris for the conference on the Convention of Climate Change next December in 2015, where I think the two countries, Peru and France, are leading today this global ambition to achieve the reduction, a common agreement to reduce the emissions, and this tackling the very pressing needs of the climate change. And here also, I would like to link both education and climate change. The same week, on the 24th of September, we organized this. In fact, this was just the next day after the climate summit. We just organized a very important event on an initiative that was launched by the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, 2 years ago, the Global Education First Initiative. We organized a high-level event where we had 14 heads of state and government, many ministers, a keynote speech given by the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, with a very strong message about the importance of education for inclusive societies, for social justice, for social mobility, of targeting also girls' education in many still environments, communities, and societies. And we came all with one important message. The message is that quality and lifelong learning for all is the key to building a more equitable, peaceful, and sustainable world. In fact, this emerges also as one of the objectives, future objective in the Sustainable Development Agenda to follow the year 2015. And let me interject here one very important element, attract your attention to something important. Of course, it is not the first time that education is being considered to be important for the development agenda. We have currently the second Millennium Development Goal, Education for All, which was launched and spearheaded by UNESCO all these last, I would say, more than 20 years. It started in Jomtien in Thailand with the first major UNESCO conference. Then it moved in Dakar in Senegal in the year 2000, where 6 goals were adopted, which represent nowadays Education for All, second Millennium Development Goal. It was important because at that time, for the first time, actually education was considered important for development. And the focus was most on access to education, on primary education. It was on the idea of we have to get all kids in school, which still is a very relevant ambition. And it is also part of our targets for the future post-2015 goal on sustainable development. But the more we analyze the state of education and the situation in the world, the more we come to the conclusion that without a good quality of education, we cannot achieve education for all. We cannot achieve that people know how to write and read, and that they also have skills in order further on to decide upon their own behaviors and their own lives. In order to eradicate poverty, to improve health, well-being, to strengthen resilience also to natural disasters, we need education, but we need not just a simple, I would say, knowledge of reading and writing. We need a quality education that is relevant and that is transformative. I think this is very important. And I was told that one of our global monitoring reports, every year we launch the global monitoring report for education for all, is on your reading list. I would like to draw your attention that we have been trying for the last more than 10 years to draw the attention of the international community, of the educators, of political leaders also, on the different aspects of education. We have had reports on girls' education. We have had reports also on technical vocational training. We have had reports on education in conflict areas, in education under attack, which still is very relevant to the situation in conflict areas in many parts of the world. We have covered the literacy report. We have covered a vast range of activities. Our last report was related to the impact of education on the other areas of development. We have shown by facts and figures that it has a deep impact on health, on gender equality, on fighting some of the pandemics, on environment protection, on solving the problem with clean waters and sanitation, and on energy, you name it, all the other relevant development aspects. We know that if all women had a secondary education, early child marriages could be reduced by 2 million. And from the current 3, we have 3 million early child marriages today, we can drastically reduce it. And also child mortality will be reduced by half. And I think that this evidence shows the power of education. 1 year of education is associated with 10% increase in wages. And study after study have shown that education people make better use of scarce resources, increases environmental awareness and concerns. And we have done recently a World Value Survey, which also favors political participation. Education is important for that. So, unfortunately, we know that still the education, primary education and secondary education remains inaccessible for 120 million boys and girls. And unfortunately, the majority of them are girls. We know that the adolescents out of primary, not to speak about secondary education, where disparities grow, I would say exponentially, the majority of girls are there. And also we know that literacy in the world still is there for almost 780 million illiterate adults. And once again, 2/3 of these illiterate adults are women. So while the world today recognizes the potential of education as a catalyst for inclusive, sustainable development, I would say as imperative also for political participation, for human rights and dignity, and definitely in some areas in the world also, I would even say a security imperative, we need still to work so that governments, civil society, academia, and private sector work closely together in order to give opportunity of these millions of young women and men and also illiterate adults to shape their own lives and participate in the social and economic endeavors of their communities, families, and their societies. Now, we are coming, as I mentioned, is a very important stage. We are negotiating the development, sustainable development goals, or as we call it, a sustainable development agenda to follow 2015. I see here 2 challenges. On one side, we have to make, as we say it here at UNESCO, the last push. We have to make everything possible to encourage governments, communities, governments at different levels, educators, everybody, all partners that are involved, United Nations, of course, agencies, to help these countries that are lagging behind to achieve as much as possible, the 2nd Millennium Development Goal on education for all. And at the same, I would say, at the same time, we have to negotiate a different approach, an approach for the future Sustainable Development Agenda that is meant to be inclusive, universal, and that is also human-centered. And I think this universality of the next Sustainable Development Agenda puts us in a slightly different perspective. There are new challenges, new opportunities also, and new way of thinking that we have to implement in order to make this paradigm shift. And I think now is the opportunity to make this paradigm shift, because if with the previous Millennium Development Goals that we had, which were more a classical approach of North-South dialogue, how we are going to help the poorer countries get back on track and introduce policies and catch up with their development efforts. And it was a little bit more of a clear approach of accompanying these governments into the way forward. With the future post-2015 agenda, the approach is different. We have to make it universal. We have to look at common challenges that do not bother us, common challenges that would ask us to rethink, I would say, education and learning from a different perspective. There was a question also in the preliminary questions that were submitted to me, which was about how this post-2015 agenda, how it should be human-centered. And I think here, one of the most important prerequisite and starting point is that education on one side is a basic human right, and we have to definitely declare this as a basic human right. Governments have the responsibility to provide some basic public services. It's a public good. It's not a charity, it's a public good, it's a right. And I think it is very important to remind that even the Universal Declaration already of Human Rights, adopted in 1948, affirms in Article 26 that everybody has the right to education. And I think it is not by chance, if you allow me to mention something very dear to me and to UNESCO, that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights draw its inspiration from UNESCO's constitution. Our constitution was the first to appear, which set the, I would say, the stage and the main human values, and in the area of human rights and human dignity. And then the United Nations decided to develop some of these ideas and adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But there is a very close link between UNESCO's constitution, I would say intimate link between UNESCO's constitution and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then we had also several other legal instruments, and I'm mentioning here, of course, the Convention of 1960 against discrimination in education, to the Convention of the Right of Child, whose anniversary, 25th anniversary, we celebrate this year. So if you allow me once again to say, and this is my first point, that education is a universal entitlement. And we have to say that if there is a right, these rights can be translated and realized fully if they're translated into legislation, into commitments, into targets, and into goals. And I believe this was behind the six goals that were adopted, as I mentioned, and that are in the basis of education for all. I think now we are also very much into debate about the lessons learned. As we wrap up the Millennium Development Goals by the year 2015. And we look at what are the good experiences and how we can draw also the good things that emerged, and what we have to take up for the future, because I believe the responsibility of education and learning. I always say education and learning, by the way, because I believe we have to change the perspective also of what education brings. So we move into a different stage also of learning, of creating knowledge-based societies with the new technologies. So I believe the lessons learned are also very important. The first lesson, of course, is that the goals should have a very clear ownership by member states. these goals should be very well embedded into national, regional, and global, I would say, political decisions. They cannot be imposed. I know that there are those who think that in the 90s there were a type of a lost decade. The international community lost a lot of time in order to be so strongly engaged also with the development. But still, I believe, and this is one of our also very good lessons learned, that the achievements are remarkable. The achievements are remarkable both in the area of numbers, speaking about education, including in some of the poorest countries in the world, where we see that access to education has been tremendously, opportunities have been tremendously open. We know that never humanity have seen in the world so many children in school. And just, I would say, in the space of only one decade, the number of children who are out of primary education have decreased by half. If we had at the beginning of this decade 107 million children out of school, now we have 57 million. Ethiopia and India, for example, just to give some concrete examples, have reduced their out of school populations by 2.2 million. 2.2 million in Ethiopia children were put in schools only in one decade. And in India, this figure is 4.5 million. In some cases, there were dramatic decreases of these out-of-school children. I'm talking about Rwanda and Vietnam, where we have seen that they have reduced the number of out-of-school children by 85%. It's really a dramatic shift. We have seen countries which were lagging behind in terms of gender parity, like Bangladesh is a telling case in point, where they have achieved gender parity in primary and secondary education starting from a very low point. And this lesson, while I was mentioning that lessons are important, I think one of the key lessons for us also is that given there is the right political will is critical, where there are the right policies, where we have also the right resources, both national and from the international donor community, that no obstacle is insurmountable. And I think this is a very clear lesson. Making education free and compulsory in many countries, making conditional cash transfers in some environments for poor families, or introducing more relevant curricula, having also trained teachers, having more female teachers in some instances, making safe schools, safe environments, linking also schooling with the, I would say, the efforts of families, linking the family environment and schooling, involving parents, working with traditional religious leaders and others, makes a huge change and opens new opportunities. So I believe we have shown that education in this last decade had an extremely positive impact on reducing poverty, on changing also some of the thinking about development. We have, and you will see in our reports have a number of success stories. We know that even in cases where, in conflict areas where we work, in the refugee camps or in some of the most difficult of the circumstances, we see that how vital education is in these particular cases. I have been recently in South Sudan, and I have seen it in one of the camps of the internally displaced person, where we have worked with the United Nations, with other sister agencies also, to establish a modest curriculum also in schooling in this camp, how important this is for the families. The second dimension, I think, that emerges also nowadays is how to retrain children in schools, to decrease the dropouts, how to make the transition to adolescence, the primary and secondary education, this phase, and also how to be sure that kids once in school are learning. I think this is a critical question that we have to ask ourselves. Because we have estimated that in the world, there are still 250 million children that are not acquired, they have not acquired, are not acquiring some basic skills, even after 4 years in school. And as a consequence of this low quality education, 50% of young people in sub-Saharan Africa are unable to read a single sentence. 40% of young people there. I think this is a crisis. This is a learning crisis. And this is not how these societies can build a sustainable future. We think that the best ways to do it is to carefully study the local circumstances and to see how we can make education systems inclusive, how we can introduce where needed mother tongue education at the primary level, how we can attract teachers, how we can train teachers, how we can craft the right curricula, and also how we can harness the power of the new technologies. I think it is a critical question nowadays because with Professor Geoffrey Sachs, we are sitting together on a very important commission that we created, UNESCO and the International Telecommunication Union, with a strong support from Columbia University, other agencies, the private sector was strongly represented and participating in this, mostly companies that are in the mobile learning. And I think this is a question to be still further on enhanced, studied, the tremendous opportunities that new technologies are giving also for access, for inclusiveness, and also for increasing the learning opportunities and the quality of education, while targeting the question of access to education, looking at some of the key issues. We are very much focusing on girls' education, and this is where I think the transition from primary to secondary education is a weak point, where girls are most likely to drop out because of social, economic, or cultural norms, or lack of safety, sanitation, or distance of schooling. We think that we have to target this 32 million girls who remained out of primary school, and an almost similar number which are out of secondary school. So what we're trying to do also within all these initiatives and the new technologies that give us tremendous opportunities to do what we think is right to do. We are also rethinking education and learning from this perspective. And as we say, quality and equity are the two main pillars of the new initiative of the Secretary General, Global Education First initiative. Let's put all kids in school and let's be sure that they're learning. But also, we have to think further on, because we consider nowadays this is not enough. Given the challenges that we have with the Sustainable Development Agenda, we think that we have also to think about what skills, what values, what attitudes young people get in school, what they are learning, what they are being taught. And I think it is also important that we change the way education is being done. We need to have young people who have critical minds, thinking critically, and also that they are very active participants in the decision making and in the lives of their communities and their societies. We think that we have to instill, to create a new type of a new sense of solidarity, global solidarity, a new sense of global dignity, of human dignity, something that has to be very closely linked also to the global challenges. And in this particular case, I think we have the very strong link between what we do in education and what we have been doing in education and the global development agenda. We link it very closely to an important activity at UNESCO in education. It is about education for sustainable development. We are now at the close of an important United Nations decade. 2005-2015 was announced, proclaimed, decided by the United Nations General Assembly and entrusted to us, to UNESCO, to coordinate and to steer forward this education for sustainable development. We know that there are a number of very important reports and conferences within the United Nations in this area. There was an important report on sustainability, which was launched in 1987, the so-called Brundtland report, chaired by the then Prime Minister of Norway, when for the first time in a report of the United Nations, education was recognized as a central part also of the development that meets also the challenges of the future generations and also of the needs and challenges of the planet. Then we had two important conferences, the important conference in Rio in '92 with the important Agenda 21, it was called, which was linking education with sustainable development, environmental protection, and also raising public awareness about it. Then we had a number of other important General Assembly decisions of the United Nations. But I believe the United Nations decade made a big difference. It made a deep difference because it linked education and sustainability. It linked also environmental protection, climate change, biodiversity, water managing of water resources, everything that is, I would say, linked to the sustainability and the Millennium Development Goals and education. And we will organize in November this year a major conference wrapping up the United Nations decade in Nagoya in Japan, one of our champion countries, together with Germany, of this important aspect of our educational activities, where we have passed this important message. And this important message is that sustainable development needs technological and economical solution, but they're not enough if we want to have sustainability or to achieve this sustainable development. We need to craft this new way of thinking, as we say, and acting, if we want to have also this type of new sustainability on the planet. And this starts with education. We need education to shape value systems, to give new skills, new knowledge also of individual women and men. And also we need to build resilient societies. And education for sustainable development, we do not see it as something that is added on top of everything else that we are doing. We think that this has to be very well integrated in curricula in education systems, because this is indeed about attitudes, about skills, about knowledge, about making responsible choices of millions, if not billions, of people on this planet. And that is why we have led dozens, if not hundreds, of different programs on teaching, online teaching, training, using new technologies also. We were working to support challenges in different levels, national strategies, classroom practices. I think I would just want to give several examples of how separate different countries, our member states, have put a big focus also on education for sustainable development. And particularly, I would say some countries which are very vulnerable from the point of view of climate change, or those who are deep also supporters and believers of education for sustainability. Finland has reformed its national core curricula to support and very well integrate education for sustainable development in the national curricula. Mauritius has made education a pillar of its policy to mainstream sustainable development. Kenya has built education for sustainable development into the national education sector program and also in its sustainable development roadmap. Many countries are integrating sustainable development principles so that students are directly also involved in managing the ecological footprint in the school. And I think this is a very good also example of personal involvement. I would just mention my personal experience. I have visited many schools which are involved in education for sustainable development. Just this year, I visited a school in Islamabad where they have set up a water harvesting system and a solar-powered computer lab. It was a very interesting also example of a very, I would say, direct approach. In Brazil, the initiative Seeds of Spring reached more than 12,000 students also in the city of Osasco, which are making also, we made them changing their own lives and the lives of their community, of better understanding biodiversities. We have an important UNESCO program, the Sandwatch program, which is a volunteering network of primary and secondary school students and teachers who monitor and evaluate, also analyze changes in coastal environment using scientific methods and low-cost equipment. We have more than 30 countries which also participate in this program. And overall, UNESCO has a huge network of schools. We have a UNESCO associated school program where we have 9,900 educational institutions in more than 180 countries, which are dedicated also to promoting the idea of sustainable development, of peace, and of citizenship. Not to speak about our network of UNESCO centers and university networks, where we have in many of these centers the importance of linkages between human rights, justice, sustainable development, and education. And this is where I believe our education for human rights comes, because we believe that we want to have citizens, young people who get out of schools with skills, with knowledge, but also who know about human rights and human dignities, and then they could participate fully in the decisions taken about themselves, of the life of their communities, and also in their countries. We see in many interesting countries also in the developed world, education for sustainable development also starts to be very well embedded. A very interesting example I can give with Germany, the construction industry in the North Rhine-Westphalia region of Germany supported the curriculum on the Vocational Training Institute with the goal of implementing sustainable development education for every apprentice, trainer, expert, and member company. And I think it is a good example also for a company, having in mind that 75% of the country's building stock is highly energy inefficient, and recognizing also this as a business opportunity. I think this is how we are trying to shift the understanding and the involvement of the private sector. In keeping also with the corporate social responsibility commitments, we work with many countries, and we see across the world that many countries are increasingly active in education for sustainable development to different projects, advocacy initiatives, public awareness campaigns, and also working a lot in capacity building. We have, I would say, a unique partnership of UNESCO with Samsung in Vietnam, with the Ministry of Education, where we support also Vietnam to create a more resilient society. And this is how we also harness the power of new technologies that I mentioned at the beginning, talking about the Broadband Commission. This project is helping to develop a e-learning training course in the area of climate change, disaster risk reduction, and biodiversity conservation, jointly also developing community action initiative. Civil society is playing a hugely important role here also. We have a wonderful projects, partnerships. Allow me also to mention an extremely interesting and important example, which is managed by an NGO, Tostan in Africa, which empower rural women, African women, to attend the Barefoot College in India, where they empower rural women to complete the training program in solar electrical engineering. And I have seen some of these grandmothers who are becoming electrical engineers, establishing their own solar systems in the poor rural communities. What is important is that then they train other also rural communities, spreading, I would say, the impact of this important project. So I think we are on a good track of working with many countries. We have strong foundations that we can to build on. We look forward to the conference in Nagoya, and I know that Professor Sachs will participate in one of our important also debates. We expect Nagoya to adopt a global action program on education for sustainable development, where we hope to advance policies to transform learning and training environments, to build capacities of education of trainers, and also to mobilize and to empower young people. We think it is critical where we want to increase also to accelerate sustainable solutions at the local level. I think education for sustainable development is very relevant also to what this important network of solutions for sustainable development means, of how to create the conditions for local solutions, for innovation, for social inclusion, for getting the innovation, I would say the intelligence of many young people in order to find these solutions. And I remember when we organized the first 2 years ago, a major conference, a forum for science, technology, and innovation for Africa in Nairobi, we did organize an important exhibition of innovations of young Kenyan students and young entrepreneurs who are coming with extremely interesting, innovative solutions to some of these important challenges. As we say here at UNESCO, one of the most important resources in this age of limit, the only renewable resources, is human ingenuity. And I'm a deep believer that human talent and ingenuity is everywhere. It is on parts of the world. It's in every community. We have to give them the opportunity to unleash this human ingenuity and this human talent with innovation, giving them the opportunity to access to new technologies, to get the quality education and learning that they deserve, and then to move on also and contribute to the search of solutions for sustainable development for the future of humanity. I think I should stop here. I guess also there will be many questions maybe already. And I think in the next maybe 10-15 minutes before we wrap up, to be able to respond to some of these questions. I'm looking now at the questions. I'm having the one of my assistants.
Okay. There are quite a number of questions asked. These ones are the most popular ones. So there's quite a few questions on teachers, on supporting teachers in most disadvantaged areas.
Yes.
Innovative models that are working.
Yes.
And how we measure quality.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of questions on teachers.
Yeah. As I was just informed, many very interesting questions, dozens of questions on linked to quality education and also to how we could position and support the teachers. I'm very pleased that these questions come today when we celebrate the World Teachers' Day. At UNESCO, it's a big event, it's a big celebration, because we have always said that teachers are at the center of any quest for quality education. We know that unfortunately we need more teachers in many parts of the world, still only for Africa to reach the education for all, the second Millennium Development Goal. We need 2.4 million teachers, and in order to I would say globally to reach the education for all sustainable development, education for all development goal, and then move by the year 2030 with the primary and secondary education, we will need much more teachers, and there should be well-trained teachers. Today, we have celebrated also with an important prize at UNESCO. We have an important prize funded by Prince Hamdan Al Maktoum from the United Arab Emirates, the deputy ruler of Dubai, who was here just an hour ago. This is a prize that is honoring teachers, that is given also to the most innovative projects of how to enhance teacher training. And I'm very pleased today that three institutions received this prize. One is an important teacher training initiative that is started by a great partner that we have, Education International, the biggest association of teachers. International is Association of Teachers, and also by an NGO. The other was an important initiative in Madagascar, and also from Panama. I think all this is important because we have to look at what makes a quality education. And I know that some of the questions were linked to what makes quality, how we can measure quality of education. On one side, talking about teachers, I think indeed that we have to be innovative. And UNESCO has launched a number of very innovative projects using new technologies for teacher training. Now, we have started 4 such projects in Africa, which are linking to enhancing teacher training using mobile technologies in the remote areas in some of the sub-Saharan countries by establishing a teacher training centers using existing or establishing new such centers. I visited last year and launched such center in Côte d'Ivoire, in Ivory Coast, in Abidjan, where with the modern technology there in this center, we are putting online courses of teacher training and also using contemporary modern technologies to reach in the most of the distance areas. In some cases, we focus on teachers for technical vocational training, which is important in many such cases. I think the power of new technologies is give us an immense opportunities for teacher training. UNESCO has been working with Intel, Cisco, with Microsoft for a number of years to create a module of what might be considered to be a teacher training module to use new technologies. And we adapt and implement this tool in very many of these countries with the support also of these very innovative global new technology companies. At the same time, we are also working on the measurement of quality. And the measurement of quality, of course, is a difficult issue. We have started by primary education. We have launched last year the metrics, the learning metrics, as we call it. Our Institute of Statistics has worked also with UNICEF, with the Brookings Institute in Washington, with some other partners also, in order to launch and to create the main indicators about what makes, what are the learning, how we measure the learning outcomes of students in the primary level. And I think, of course, in different circumstances, it can be adapted, but already we started adapting this module, this learning method for different circumstances. Now we're working on the enhancing it also for the secondary level. And as far as, of course, universities, it's a much more complex issue. Here we have worked with the number of years with the such partners like OECD or some of the big universities also to see what are, in fact, because there are different measurement tools, and all of them are relevant on one particular aspect or on the other. We work in different parts also to create a mutual recognition of diplomas, which is very important, a tool of bringing the quality of higher education also in a coherent manner for different regions. Only this December, we will convene a major meeting for the African countries in headquarters in order to revisit the convention adopted in Arusha a long time ago and to introduce also some new elements of mutual recognition of diplomas in Africa, because we think this is the way also to stimulate social mobility, mobility of workers, enhance the quality of education, and create more opportunities also to boost economy and to create a more enabling, I would say, social and economic environment. The question of quality of education, of course, is very much linked to changing curricula, putting as I say, the right curricula, of enhancing also and introducing in very many of the curricular elements of the, as we say, this notion of global citizenship, of sustainable development, of human rights, of cultural literacy, of tolerance, of understanding each other, of gender equality. All these are huge challenges that we have to tackle, but we believe that if we speak about quality education, there are three main elements. There are teachers, these are curricular, and these are the power of new technologies that can help us enormously in this effort. I'm looking at maybe some other questions.
Yeah, there's questions on integrating, another set of questions on how to integrate like health issues, health education, and climate change issues into the curriculum. We're also doing work on that, so it's another angle.
Yes, I hear that the question about how we integrate issues of health and climate change, also we link it to education. I think this is a very important question, not least because this year's report that on the global monitoring report is very much linked to the impact of education on the other development aspects. And I believe it is important from our own perspective. I believe in development, we cannot have silos. We cannot look at education only separately. We have to link it to health, because we know on one side that when there is a young woman, a mother that is educated, her child is more likely to survive beyond the age of 5 when she has a primary education. And this is just I would say, an evidence that we know it. But also, we believe that knowledge about some of the main challenges of health of pandemics is critical in this very moment. I cannot just go without mentioning the Ebola crisis that is ravaging some of the African countries. And we know that part of the problem of moving quickly with containing these pandemics is the importance of knowledge, the importance of information, the cognizance of the pandemics, of the sickness itself, of the virus, of how to, what kind of attitudes and some preventive measures. And as anybody else in the United Nations system nowadays is trying to respond to the appeal of the Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who took the lead in mobilizing a huge support, worldwide support to accompany these countries in their very, I would say, tough times. We are launching a big program this week for Liberia and Sierra Leone, of understanding of what it is all, awareness, a huge awareness campaign through the community radios. UNESCO has been associated with community radios, established community radios in many countries in the world. In the middle-income countries, in Africa, only in Liberia and Sierra Leone, we have more than 30 community radios that we have established. And in some of these rural areas, this is apart from the mobile technologies they have, this is the only way of having knowledge and awareness about certain important development issues. And this is the way also how we can support. We have been working also with other agencies to combat HIV/AIDS. We have a system of coordination called UNAIDS, where with the 10 United Nations agencies, funds and programs, we work together in order to reduce, not only to reduce, but as we say, to reduce by zero HIV/AIDS in many communities. And UNESCO has been taking over the responsibility of the prevention, of introducing also in schools awareness and knowledge about how to prevent, the preventive role, also the necessity of prevention, and also how further on to overcome stigma from the point of view also of human dignity and human rights, an extremely important work that we have been doing. So there are many, I would say, cases where education and health have shown that they go hand in hand. And of course, climate change, because there was a question also about climate change, a critically important also. UNESCO is working in the creating a more resilient societies on one side, both through education of programs of education for climate change, but also in a very practical, I would say, very important areas. UNESCO has been managing and coordinating tsunami alert systems in the major oceans and seas in the world. I'm speaking about, of course, the tsunami alert system in the Atlantic, the first one, then in the Pacific, recently launched such system in the Indian Ocean 2 years ago after the devastating tsunami and earthquake, and also in the Mediterranean. And let me say that the tsunami alert systems are very closely linked also to awareness and to education and to the preparedness. We have been also working during all the, I would say, the recent climate change events and conferences, Rio Plus 20, recently, of course, the climate summit. We work to develop a climate science, which is important for us. UNESCO has been entrusted by the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, to establish a scientific advisory board with him to advise him and other agencies in the United Nations system, which is hosted by us because we are the agency that has in our mandate deeply science policies and the interface between science and policy. And in all of these efforts, we have been trying to pass a strong message that solutions, if we want to change this paradigm to come up from where I started, to change the paradigm of development and link it also closely with climate change, we have to have educated people. We have to have people who are committed, who have the notion about being global citizens, and who have the responsibility also of changing the world the way we see it in the important area of limited resources nowadays. So I think UNESCO is very well working both with the Peruvian authorities and with the French authorities. Next year, we will organize major conferences at UNESCO of the scientific community and also of the private sector. But what I wanted particularly to mention is that we very much cognizant and very much turn toward youth, because we do believe that in this area of changing the paradigm, of shifting the way our mentality, the way we consume, the way we live, the way we produce, we need the very strong commitment of young people. And next year, at the beginning of, at the end of October, when we start our next general conference, and a month before the climate summit here in Paris, UNESCO will organize a youth forum which will be dedicated to climate change. This is the way we think how we can raise the awareness of and engage and motivate, also mobilize young people about sustainable development.
Do you need to cut now? There's a few more. There's quite a few questions.
Yes, I think I have to wrap up. I know there are very many interesting questions. I would like to thank once again the Earth Institute for this wonderful initiative, to thank all the universities. They have been linked online for this so important initiative. I would like to thank for inviting me to participate and to showcase what our organization, the United Nations Organization for Education, Science, Culture, Information and Communication, can bring to the debate, and also to thank you, most particularly all the students, for participating and for their interest. As we say very often we speak about the youth. You are tomorrow's leaders, generations and everything. But for us here at UNESCO, what is most important is your engagement today. And I would like to thank you for that and for your commitment.